Okay, so we're going to do John 1, which I think will summarize a lot of the themes that we've been talking about. But first, I had a few more things to say. Oh my God, I can't believe it. Oh, I thought I forgot my water, which is like exactly why I did this break earlier. So, okay, we're good. All right, sorry. Yes, so I want to introduce, add a few more components to the introduction, specifically of John, because there are a number of technical, well, the way it's written, we need to clarify a little bit so we don't fall into problems as we read it further. So, first of all, there's the repeating saying of the Jews, right? And when the Gospel of John talks about the Jews, it's always the villains, right? So actually not always, but most of the time. So this Gospel has been used in history to justify the persecution and the oppression and the genocide of the Jews, right? I mean, some of these quotes where Jesus is talking about the Jews, or John is talking about the Jews as a kind of, really degenerate group of people, and so this has become the basis, right, for the church's rampant anti-Semitism and for the church's persecution of the Jews, right? So we have to clarify, what did John mean by the expression the Jews? Because clearly he did not mean the Jewish people, right? Because he was Jewish, Jesus was Jewish, the disciples were Jewish. So there's an issue of translation. And a lot of scholars now are leaning towards a translation to mean not the Jews, but the Judeans. And this actually makes sense. And so let me explain who are the Judeans, right? So at the time, Israel it was a kind of it was a dual society. You had the north, where Jesus was from, which was kind of like the countryside or the hillbillies, if you want to look at it. In the United States, you have kind of like the center. You have deep America, and then you have the cities. This is how it was in Israel, right? In the land of Israel, you had Galilee, which was really mostly small rural communities. That's where you had most of the political unrest. Most of the zealots are coming from there. A lot of the Pharisees are teaching in that region too. We'll talk about the Pharisees in a second. And these were usually humble people, including the Pharisees, usually people who had, kind of a small trade, and then, they were able to teach, or the people were actually quite poor, the average person. So you had these, and those were the Galileans, right, where Jesus was from. And then you had the Judeans, and these were the city people. They were in Jerusalem, and they were actually the priestly caste, the priestly class, right, in Jerusalem was very powerful. They were the ones in charge of the temple. They're described actually by the historian Josephus, right, as being actually not very liked by the people, actually, in general, because for two reasons. Number one, they were intent more of building their wealth than in really having any spiritual contribution. So they would be in charge of the temple, but in a kind of mechanistic way. Their main interests were, I mean, not all, right? There were some amazing priests, but in general, as a class, they were very wealthy. They were very disconnected from the problems of the people. And they were the ones who were continuously creating diplomatic ties with the Romans, mostly so they could stay in power, right? So they had this arrangement with the Romans to say, look, you keep us in power, you let us do our rituals, you keep our, you don't touch our wealth and our power, and we will make sure that anybody who is a rebel or who looks like an enemy of the state, we will deliver them to you. This was an arrangement they had with the Romans. And so when Jesus is delivered to them, to the Romans, it is actually this priestly caste who does it. It's not the Pharisees. The Pharisees are not part of this class. The Pharisees were lay people who had a kind of a burden to teach. They had a trade, and they were they were liked by the people. They were very close to the people, and in many ways, Jesus functioned as a Pharisee himself, right? When we see descriptions of Jesus, how he taught, the fact that he had a trade, in addition to teaching, the contents of his teachings, you see that he has connections with this with the Pharisees. He could well have been himself a Pharisee, right? which explains why there's so much aggressivity between him and the Pharisees. This is not aggressivity. This is the normal way of debating in a Jewish house of study. If you've ever had the experience to watch the movie Yentl, it's an old movie, but you can see very clearly some Jewish house of studies there. People are aggressive when they study together, right? They're saying, you moron, you don't understand this text, you're so stupid, let me tell you what it looks like, right? So, and they're cutting each other down. So the study of the Bible in the Jewish house of studies or in the Hebrew house of studies was actually very passionate and very, could be hostile. They could become enemies over the text, right? And you had Pharisees who were fighting like that. At the time of Jesus, you had two main schools who hated each other, the school of Hillel, the school of Shammai, and they were fighting among themselves in a way that was as aggressive as how Jesus was fighting with some of them. So this way, this kind of, the way that Jesus, when he's talking to the Pharisees, the way that he's kind of a smartass, this is typical, right? This is actually how they talk to each other. This is normal. Nobody was shocked, right? This is how one master talked to another, right? This was the way. So, but the real enemies of Jesus were not the Pharisees. They were the Judean class who wanted to maintain power over the people and who couldn't because the people were flocking to Jesus. So the book of John is the only gospel who really gives a clear account of Jesus's court scene. Certainly because John was there, we know that. So, and actually blames the people who delivered Jesus onto the Romans, blames the class of the priests. The priestly class are the ones who did that. That was their job. They were the ones who were, what's the word? That a better word than kissing ass. They were the ones colliding with the Romans, right? Colluding, not colliding, colluding with the Romans. And they were the ones who, that was their thing. They would deliver any enemy of the state to the Romans in exchange for the protection of their powers and their privilege, right? So very likely Jesus was delivered by these people rather than by the Pharisees or by the Jews in general. And he was actually very popular, not only among the Jews, the people, right, but also among the Pharisees, right? Many Pharisees were disciples of Jesus. Okay, so now you see a little bit, the Judeans, they are this class. So when Jesus is talking about the Judeans in our text, translated badly, the Jews, he's actually talking about this class, right? Does this make sense? Questions? Rudolph, go ahead.
Sorry, I was muted. Question and comment. When you use certain descriptors for the high priests, could it be compared to the Roman Senate and the senators in a sense?
Yeah, they have the Sanhedrin. It's the equivalent of the Senate. So the Sanhedrin was the great assembly, right, where every decision was made. Sanhedrin was made half Pharisees, half priests, right?
Right.
And but when Jesus was taken during the night, it's interesting. The book of John said they met at the house of the high priest. No, the Sanhedrin, you cannot, it's illegal for it to work at night. It's written in Jewish law. You are not allowed to have a trial at night. And so they certainly did not have a trial. They had a little gathering in the house of the high priest among very small minority, and they brought Jesus there, and then they delivered him to Pilate. They did not need the Sanhedrin because they had this arrangement with the Romans. So the Sanhedrin does not meet at night, and I don't see how 70 people could be gathered in a couple hours during the night in this rush, right? They did not, if they had a Sanhedrin, it was a very small part, and it was anyways illegal, according to Jewish law. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. And now it even makes more sense. It's actually kind of a conspiracy and a combination of 3 or 4 things. It's Judas with his greed ratting Jesus out. It's the high priests. It's the Sanhedrin, and then Pontius Pilate.
Yeah.
So this is like the perfect storm. I don't know if there's stories about Jesus predicting this in the end, but there are predictions that he's saying, I will die and, I will go to heaven. He clearly must have seen the political developments in this town right in front of him. This is not happening overnight. This is going on for a couple of weeks or a couple of months even. So very interesting to see. It's a conspiracy, clearly now. It's a crime novel.
Oh yeah, yeah, it is. And let's I want to keep the Sanhedrin out of it because there was no Sanhedrin. I'm sure there was no Sanhedrin.
I read that before, and the way you said it makes perfect sense, that it was just a small interest group that actually drove that whole thing.
The other gospels talk about the Sanhedrin, but when you look at the way that things took place in reality, it's illegal, and you cannot, it's 70 people. What, 70 people are going to come out of their beds, notwithstanding that the Sanhedrin usually was heavy heated debate. That's what characterized the Sanhedrin. We see a glimpse of that debate in the when they start to talk about stoning the Christians, and you have dissenting voices saying, no, let's not do that, right? So real Sanhedrin would be dissent. For sure, there would be a few voices. This is how they work. So the fact that there was no dissent, it was done at night, and it could not. The Sanhedrin could not have been involved. So the other gospels do talk that the Sanhedrin was there, but they do not have, in my view, and in the view of many scholars, they do not have as clear of an account as John, and so scholars lean towards the testimony of John on this matter. And also John is closer to the historical reality of how things probably took place, since we know how things took place with the Sanhedrin. So yeah, so now you know a little bit. The Jews are the Judeans, the priestly caste, and so whatever virulence he has, and he has the right, because remember, Jesus is, in many ways, he has a calling as a priest, right? So not that he knew that or anything, but he is closely related to the temple. The temple for him is his home, right? And so to see what's happening there drives him crazy, right? So, okay, so that's the first thing we need to know about the book of John. Second thing, very interesting expression, the Son of Man. And I want to talk about that a little bit because it has always bothered me. Like I see him going around, speaking of himself in the third person, like Julius Caesar, going around saying, the Son of Man this, the Son of Man that. And it felt so pompous and arrogant, and I used to hate that gospel until finally someone explained to me what is going on, and I will explain it to you because it really made sense to me. Now, there are many ways to explain this, but I'll give you the explanation that worked the best for me. So, Son of Man, we need to know, he's quoting, and we know that for sure, he's quoting the book of Daniel. Now, we have to ask ourselves, why? Right? So he's using a concept in the book of Daniel. So if you read Daniel, you will see, I will tell you a little bit now. Daniel, of course, is about the end of times. It's an apocalyptic book. And in this book, you have a scene where you have, let me remember, I'm trying to not mix it up with the book of Revelation. You have a scene in heaven, right, where you have on earth, everything's going to shit, right? Everything is going badly. It's the end of times. And then you look, and then there's a scene in heaven happening simultaneously. And in this scene, we see God, right? Described as a very old man, the Ancient of Days. And then the camera, or the angelic camera, zooms in on a figure that looks like a son of man. Now, in that context, it simply means a figure that looks like a human being. Son of man is a technical, it's a direct translation. I think that section in Daniel is written in Aramaic, but I'm not sure, maybe Hebrew. It's in Hebrew. Bnei Adam, son of man, means human. So all it's saying is that there is a figure that looks like a human, right? And then we see this figure coming on clouds of glory and so forth. So Christians immediately identify this as Jesus, right? But then it continues, and this is what we miss. The text continues to talk about describing now a collective entity. So we first the text says, okay, the Son of Man will come upon the clouds and will rule and judge the world. And then it broadens the concept, and the text goes on to say, the believers, the chosen of God, will rule and judge the world. So there is an identification in the book of Daniel, this is very important, between the Son of Man as a person and the Son of Man as a collective entity. What do I mean by that? when it seems so, everybody understood what I'm saying so far? This is important. Did you follow the argument that in the book of Daniel, the Son of Man is, first of all, yes, a lone figure coming on the clouds, but then the concept is broadened to include the people of God in general, right? Because the Son of Man as a lone figure, his purpose is to judge the universe. And then a few verses later, we see the people of God are also to judge the universe. So the text is identifying Son of Man is simply a symbol to describe the coming of the chosen of God, who are then going to judge the world. Do you see that argument? Do you see what I'm saying? Because that's important for the rest. Okay, great. If you need the reference, I can give it to you from Daniel, and you can read it yourself. I have to find it somewhere. Okay, so if that is the case, when Jesus is saying the Son of Man, what he's referring to is not so much himself as this new man, this new human entity that is supposed to emerge, that is supposed to be the awakened human consciousness that are going to be part of this chosen people, right? So when he's saying the Son of Man this, the Son of Man that, some scholars argue, and I kind of like their argument, he's not saying he's not referring to himself in the third person, which would be kind of arrogant in my view. He's actually referring to this collective entity of the chosen of God, which he calls this Son of Man, or we can call it the second Adam, right? Or the new man, or this new consciousness that is supposed to be awakened by his teachings, right? Is what is going to be building the kingdom. And so when you see the technical term Son of Man, doesn't just mean Jesus. Of course, yes, he's the first, but it can mean also in general the people of God, right? Or the followers of Jesus. Christo Dulu, go ahead.
Sorry, what was the Hebrew word for the Son of Man again?
See, I'm hesitating to give it to you because I'm not sure if that's the actual word used in Daniel. I have to check. B'nai Adam, literally Son of Man. I have to check in the translation though. And it simply means human being, right? But I have to check it if actually, right, this is what the book of Daniel is, the expression the book of Daniel is using, and I have to check that. So if you email me, I will give you the reference in the book of Daniel where this thing is, and I will look up the Hebrew.
Okay, yeah, because that phrase is used in the Quran, the tribe of Adam, like to refer to humans, like because Beni Adam is Beni is also in Arabic.
Nice, and it means right, same thing, right?
Yeah, that's why I was curious whether it was like son or tribe.
Yeah, excellent. So yeah, that confirms. I have to check for sure though, so that it is that way in the Hebrew or Aramaic. I forget which language is used in that section of Daniel. So, but then right, Jesus is not talking about something superior. He's talking about a consciousness that we need to awaken to, right? I really believe Jesus is there to awaken consciousness. He's a guru, right? I'm going to look at him like that, right? There's other aspects, obviously, but this is one of the aspects that he is supposed to bring. The new human, the new man or the new woman is supposed to be emerging through the movement that he is starting, right? Okay. And then we have last thing. I want to talk a little bit about the moments in the book of John where you have a lot of like a conflict between light and darkness. And this is where you have those passages, you have to believe in Jesus or else, right? You have a lot of dogmatic passages, churchy passages, where you have Jesus seems to be, right? This is in the mouth of Jesus, right? Seems to be saying, yeah, if you follow me, you are children of light, but if you don't follow me, you're children of darkness, and you will, gnash your teeth in the fires of hell or whatever, right? So, so here I'm going to do something I don't usually do, but I think it calls for it. I think we need to distinguish between the narrator and Jesus, right? So there's Jesus's teachings, and then there's John, the narrator, who is putting words to a certain degree in the mouth of Jesus. Now, he does it well because in general, the essence of what Jesus is doing is well transmitted. But I think that there's a lot of rage in Jesus that is actually John's, right? So remember, John is described in the Gospels as the son of thunder. He's the one who, I don't know if you know this story, but Jesus and the disciples were walking through a village and asked for hospitality, and the village was like, hell no, we don't know you, go. And John asked Jesus, is like, shall I call the fires of heaven upon this village, right? And Jesus is like, what the hell? What's wrong with you? No, right? So John, you can see, is very fiery, passionate, with anger management issues, right? So I would like to distinguish between the teachings of Jesus per se, which are in general inclusive, right, as we see through the other Gospels, and then this kind of now binary that comes, and the dichotomy between light and darkness is closer to the style of apocalyptic literature. You see it in other texts, same style, children of darkness, children of light. This is a discourse that you find in the apocalyptic literature of the time. Literally, you see this expression, children of darkness, children of light, fighting. So Jesus certainly, I mean, I don't exclude that he could have had a moment where he's talking like that, but I tend to feel like this is John influenced by the apocalyptic literature, putting these words in Jesus. That's how I'm going to go about this, because the notion of this kind of, I don't think Jesus, based on the other Gospels, of course, I don't think Jesus was going around saying, you, not you, you, not you, right? That doesn't seem characteristic of his style. But again, I do not want to, I'm open to different interpretations, since one of my principles of exegesis is to respect the text. So, okay. Are we ready for chapter 1? Finally, where's my Bible? I had a lot of time to... Okay, I'll do without a Bible. Okay, chapter 1. Any questions before I get to chapter 1? Okay, great. I'm tired too. So, chapter 1. All right, so this is for me, when I started to really read it in the light of this kind of second breath, or the receiving of the presence of God within us, it started to make sense. So let's begin with the text. It starts like this, right? In the beginning was the Word, right? And the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So here we have a blend, right? We have a blend of Greek and Hebrew theology. The Greek here for word is logos, and if you've done philosophy, you know what is logos in the Greek. So can anyone who's done some Greek studies tell me, what does logos mean in the Greek mind? What does it denote, the word logos? Rudolph, go ahead.
Well, it's something unfathomable, a spirit, a thought, a discussion, a dimension, wisdom. It has various meanings. It doesn't mean logic or the word in itself. It could mean God.
Okay, good. Anybody else? The Greeks among us, the classicists. I know a bunch of you doing classics. Have you come across logos in your Greek studies? Okay. Logos, right. Logos is the principle of cosmic, of the cosmos, right? The cosmos is harmonious, is balanced because of the logos, the kind of rational principle, intelligence, which makes it so, right? So logos, when you see logos, you know immediately it has to do with the Greek concept of the birth of the cosmos, right? It is logos, the word, the intelligence, the reason, which enables the emergence of the cosmos, which is, cosmos means world, right? I mean, you know this, but it's a Greek word. So so logos is part of Greek cosmology, right? It's the principle which makes possible the cosmic harmony, right? Cosmic order. So we know that. Now, allusion to Genesis 1 simultaneously, in the beginning. This is direct quote. Anybody who is a Hebrew reading this in the beginning, you're thinking of Genesis 1, like a lot of you did, right? Okay, so here's my question to you. Why is it that at the onset of his gospel, he begins by alluding to the creation story, both the Greek and the Hebrew creation story? What is his point? What is the subliminal message? What's he trying to say about everything that's going to follow? What do you think? Olivera, go ahead.
There's something new. There's like a creation process, like is starting over again. Like it was a creation from the beginning, and now it's like a recreation.
Okay, very good. Right, that's kind of how I read it. And we have to understand where we are to really see the element of this. We are, remember I told you, we are in a time which is apocalyptic. It's the end of time. We have rampant violence, poverty, oppression. Rome is considered to be one of the darkest periods of Jewish history, right? The oppression was unbelievable. I mean, if you know some of the history, there were crosses lining the streets, right? They would crucify people every day, right? It was extremely violent, oppressive regime, right? And it was really a time where just history was ending, right? And it's a time really that resembles, in the creation story, corresponds to the moment of the tohu wabohu, right? I don't know if you remember this. Tohu wabohu, when, this is the Hebrew for the earth was in form, right? And void, or formless, sorry, formless, I'm speaking French, formless and void, right? In the Hebrew, tohu wabohu, right? This is a time like that. This is the unraveling of the cosmic order, right? The Greeks could see it. The Hebrews could see it. The Romans, they were the cause of it, right? They were doing this. But the Greek mind that was refined and the Hebrew mind were seeing this is the unraveling of the world. The cosmic order is disintegrating. We saw this in the book of Genesis, how we are responsible for the cosmic order. And when there's too much greed and lust and violence, it deteriorates. And this is where we were, right? The Romans were the embodiment, the national embodiment of greed, lust, and violence, right? And they had taken over the world. So we are in this period of decreation. It's the end of the world in a way. And when you read the prophecies of Daniel, which were the only prophetic books they had at the time, the world is ending. After Rome, it's over. There's nothing, right? So people were aware of that, right? Even the prophecies had prophesied when Rome comes to power, it's the last power, is the last beast, right? Is the end, right? So, okay. So now imagine the time, right? The darkest time of history, and you have this text, right? This scripture, which is saying, in the beginning, the word, right? And so we know, if you are sensitive enough, you realize what John is saying is that out of this chaos, a new creation, a new beginning, a new world. This is how momentous for the gospel writers is the story of Jesus, or the teachings of Jesus, or the life of Jesus. For them, it represented the beginning of a new world, a new era, a new creation, the possibility of the whole world being rebirthed through this chaos, right? So this is what's happening, right? So far, so good. I think the Jews and the Greeks who are reading this are seeing, okay, wow, okay, new beginning, new creation, that's great. But where the text loses both of them is when the word becomes flesh, right? And now both the Greeks and the Jews are like, what? Because remember, the Logos is up there in the world of forms. It does not enter the corruption of the universe. And for the Hebrews, the equivalent in Hebrew, right, the davar, or the God himself, right, it does not enter, right? He intervenes, he rules, but he does not penetrate, right? So this is where we get, I think, the originality of the Gospels with regards to everything we've studied so far. This is the first time a glimpse into the possibility of the divine merging with the human in a profound way. In other words, for the first time, and so I'm not even going to read it like it's about Jesus. I think it's about us, right? For the first time, the Logos can enter the flesh. First of all, in the person of Jesus, we see how he embodies this, right? But second of all, in us, right? The goal of the text is to say, the goal of the whole Gospels, I think the goal of the whole teachings of Jesus is to give us this glimpse into this amazing possibility that we can contain God. In other words, that we can contain the love, the wisdom, the light, the power of God himself, right? And so this is not about being a magician and manipulating the power to your own advantage, right? This is about God moving through us, right? And we become empty vessels, or like Paul says beautifully, we become jars of clay which hold an infinite treasure, right? So, and by the way, Rumi, Muslim poet, right, says the same thing. Beautiful a story where he says it is an ocean within a water jar, he calls it, right? It's a beautiful quote where he's saying we are inhabited by God, right? And so this idea that God can be within us, that we can have such a deep, intimate relationship, that God can dwell within us like a beloved, rather than like a judge, right? You will find this idea, right? This is an idea that was so powerful that it is snowballed into all of the traditions, right? You see it in Islam, in Sufism. You see it obviously in Christianity, in the mystical writings of, for example, Avila and so forth. And you see it in Judaism, in the Kabbalistic writings, right? This idea was so powerful that we can be in a relationship with God as a lover is with a beloved, right? That God can become the lover of our souls. This was unheard of before, but this became an idea that was really diffused. I mean, the light was so powerful that it just exploded and entered into all three monotheistic traditions, right? Even though the Muslims did not follow Jesus and had a lot of questions with regards to Jesus and this whole notion that he is God or whatever, the Sufis caught on, I think, to the essence of what Jesus was doing. All that Jesus is saying is that we can become the throne room of God. We can become the temple of God. And in saying this, there is no blasphemy for either any of the traditions. And I think this is what Jesus meant when he said, I and the Father are one. He's not saying I am God. He's saying I am inhabited by God. And this is not a blasphemous idea in any of the traditions. We see it developed in all three traditions in a few centuries later, right? So this, I think, is how we need to see, and this is, let's not say, let me not dictate. This is one possible way to understand the divinity of Jesus. It's not that he was anything special, just to respond to Oliveira. We all have this possibility to be inhabited by the divine, and Jesus just happened to be the first one to walk that path. We are meant to follow in his footsteps, and we are meant to be ourselves temples of the presence of God. So there is nothing really blasphemous about this idea, except that it was misunderstood at the time because it was so new. And so people picked up stones when he said, I and the Father are one. He was about to be stoned, right? Because they understood, I am God. It's not what he's saying. He's saying, I contain God. I am moved by God. I am inspired by God. And this is the path that any human being is meant to have. In the second stage of creation, we were meant to receive a second breath, we were meant to have a second soul in a way, right? Or our soul is meant to be even more powerfully infused by the divine light, right? In that sense. Okay, see, 3 questions, wonderful. Okay, so let's start with Christodoulou Giannakopoulos Williams.
It's interesting that you say that, because there was another Sufi who said, I'm the truth, like I am like an attribute of God. And like if he didn't get stoned in that moment, he got in a lot of trouble for saying that. But yeah, it's the same idea that God is within you, like the truth is within you.
Yeah, and this was so new at the time. This is why so many people were, shocked and appalled when Jesus or the Sufis making these claims, because it's like, what? This is impossible. But actually, when you look at the first creation story, we have already received the breath of God, right? So here, this is a deeper infusion of the divine breath. This is an infusion not only of the oxygen, ability to breathe, but infusion of ability to be moved by God, inspired by God, to be possessed by God, right? Like we are possessed by, like our breath, as intimate as our breath can be the presence of God within us, right? So later, I think this mystical traditions really were able to develop this idea very well, and bring it and spread it into the three monotheisms very nicely. So yes, Islam, the Quran has contentions about the theology, but I think they got the point in the end. So, okay, next is Giannakopoulos.
So couldn't you say that Christ was saying that he was also God, and that he was also saying that we could also contain God within us? And I'll give my reasoning for that, because he says at the Last Supper, take of my flesh and I will dwell in you, right? Saying that God can dwell in us once we take Holy Communion, essentially. And so that's one way he says it. And before then, he says that you have to go through holy baptism, which, we also saw in the text. He's the one that really allowed it to happen, right? So who else could have allowed that to happen other than someone that came from God? That's what I'm just saying. You can also look at it like that.
I'm with you. There are, again, the Messianic secret is letting seep. It's true. There are glimpses of what you are saying throughout the text, right? And I think it's worth it. I'm not going to talk about it because I want to have a different approach, but I acknowledge that this is definitely something that we need to seriously explore. What does it mean? What would it mean, right? So right now we're looking at Jesus being one with God in that sense, right? And this is one way to understand it, which I think works with people who are not Christian, right? It is easier to digest that if you're not a Christian. But I will not downplay the indications and the glimpses that are also in the text, which seem to indicate that there is, in a way, God himself is incarnating, right?
There's another thing with, like, there was no other prophet. Let's say that let's just assume that Christ was a prophet of some sort, right? There was no other prophet that had ever said, I am the Son of God. So, like, and they knew a lot, we can tell from all the writings, they never once said that I am the Son of God. So that must mean that there's a very powerful meaning to that. And it goes a lot deeper,
Here's how I would do it. I think it should be said, but I don't think it should be said out loud. I think it should be whispered, because that is the only way to truly utter the name of God, right? I mean, this is what I don't like about, if I may, about the Christian approach to these stories, is to just make it so blaringly evident and kind of saying, but it's true, it cannot be otherwise, right? Whereas I think in the text, this truth is there, but it's whispered. There are prayers in the Jewish tradition which are only whispered. It's interesting. They're only said out loud, for example, during the Day of Atonement, and there are reasons for that. There are words in the Hebrew Bible that are not spoken. And notably the name of God, when you read it in the Hebrew scroll, it's not spoken. They use another word for it. They use Adonai or Lord, right? So I think if we are going to talk about the divinity of Jesus, at this time and moment in time, we can only do so in a whisper. Do you see why? Because if we say it loudly and blaringly and triumphantly, it destroys it. I don't know. It just does. I don't know. It's just,
Well, I think there are a lot of times where he didn't want to. And there were others that said that he was. Yeah. Like, and we read it today. Like, he goes, so I say that I saw you under the fig tree and that I know your name, and you called me the Son of God. So yeah. He didn't even say it himself, but exactly. Others said it, right? So a lot of times, and that could have been spread by word of mouth. And at that point, what is he going to say? Oh, I'm not, So
well, he does rebuke.
He doesn't want
times,
to. Yeah.
Right? When people come to him and say, you are this, or come to tell him he's good or want to worship him, he's like, stop that, right? So there is on his part a resistance to that. Later, after, but yet there are glimpses. But I think, this is part of, you see, if God reveals himself in a sure way, it's not God anymore, right? What makes God God is the mystery, is the fact that it's transcendent. It goes beyond us. So if we start to speak, if we want Jesus to be God, we cannot speak like this. You know what I'm saying? We have to protect the divinity by whispering it. I don't know if that makes any sense.
No, I understand what you're saying, Professor. I understand.
Okay, at least one person understands, right? And this is a very Hebrew thing, right? There's a beautiful prayer which is the Shema Yisrael, the Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one. This is said out loud in the synagogues. And then right after it says, blessed be your name and your kingdom forever. This is whispered. Every Friday night, they say this prayer, but when they say, blessed be your name and your kingdom forever, they whisper it. Why? Because this is underground information, right? And I would love if we would talk about the divinity of Jesus as underground information. This is there, but it's so powerful that it has to be kept a secret. Otherwise, it will lose its power. Does that make sense? Hopefully a little bit. Okay, I'm not sure exactly myself, but I just feel like we need to respect, if it's really true that Jesus is God, we cannot put it as a dogma because this becomes a human construct. We need to respect the infinite aura of this truth by whispering it. And I think if the church had whispered it throughout the ages, we would be in a very different time than the church brandishing this and killing in the name of it, right? Anyways, those are my thoughts. Williams and then Oliveira. Williams?
I was gonna say it reminds me of the video I sent you. And how basically he said we're going to this point where Jesus as a character may be man becoming God, and it's his evolution. The miracles are not fantastical, and we're not supposed to go by the scripture. We're supposed to understand that it's our journey towards Godhood. Like I sent you a video where it has like a long analysis of like humanity is supposed to become gods. That's our future. And Jesus is just one of the characters that'll help us get there.
Okay, so you can, yes, see, I love the way each one of you is taking a little, like, it has a different facet on the messianic mystery. This is just beautiful. I love it. I want it to stay like that. That it's like a crystal, right? When you see a crystal, you see all the different facets, right? And I love the way you put it, because yes, this is also a way to understand the teachings of Jesus as a path to evolution, as a path to development, to awakening, right? And at the same time, I see that there is a deeper thing going on too, right? Which is what Gianna Kopoulos is whispering to us, right? So I love it. I love the way you're each taking or seeing one facet of this profound mystery and kind of incorporating. That's the idea. That's why it's a mystery. That's why it's so hidden, so that we each can unveil that which matches our heart, right? But at the same time, we should remain open to the depth that we can still explore, right? Which is perhaps at this point in time can only be whispered, right? Oliveira, go ahead.
I just want to say that when I wrote my reading questions, I had wrote there that I couldn't see how the average person can be like Jesus, because I was most focused on all the miracles he was performing and the things he was doing, and then that felt very foreign and very impossible. But now this idea of manifesting God's presence, of God's image, as Jesus did in many ways with his, generosity and his, gentleness, it seems more acceptable.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially since we've determined earlier in the discussion that the miracles are secondary, right? They're not what really matters here, right? It's just Jesus not resisting the urge, right? I love the way you put it.
Miracles too. Who knows? Maybe we will be able to do miracles one day.
Yes, again, right? We should not downplay the possibility. If we're really going to be inhabited by God and are really supposed to walk in the footsteps of Jesus, perhaps we have this power, but we haven't learned to tap into it yet. See, everything is on the table, guys. Everything, the Lamb of God, the divinity of Jesus, the priestly role. But what I'm trying to give you right now are the pieces you can swallow. Right? And myself, I am only able to swallow a few pieces too. There are many things that Christianity teaches in a dogmatic sort of way, which make no sense to me. So I haven't figured it out yet, so I'm not teaching it. But I acknowledge that there is a depth to this mystery that is worth exploring. All of us, I think. Williams, go ahead.
Oh, I forgot to say this. And so basically, the works of Alan Moore actually about like the apocalypticness of the 20th century and how the 20th century is dying. And we're seeing material like especially superhero fiction or fiction around like super characters is designed around, like he writes specifically about the apocalypse, about how we seek salvation from superheroes. And he talks about that. He said, like, listen, that you wouldn't like that world if somebody was wearing a costume and beating you up. And he says Jesus is the flip side of that, because he said that's one of the first like biblical superheroes you could think about. But it's interesting because he talks about this darkness, and he's like, it's hard to kind of like deal with the fact that modern society is dying, and we don't know where it's going.
Exactly. Very good. So maybe we need a third creation and a third breath. So, but yeah, we are in similar times, right? As the time of Jesus, and maybe a new apparition will occur, right? Or maybe we are meant now to become, right, the hands and feet of God, right? Maybe that was, I mean, some scholars say, I don't agree completely, but I like it still, that the so-called second coming of Jesus is supposed to happen. We are the ones supposed to be bringing that, right? So I think some Hindu scholars said that, whom I like very much, called Yogananda. And a very important American philosopher, Leonard Cohen, said that in one of his songs, right? I forget which song, but he talks about the resurrection occurring in our hearts, right? So there's a whole movement right now talking about a new coming, right, of Jesus, but we are the ones supposed to be bringing that. We are the ones supposed to be embodying that. I think it's a part of the truth, not the whole truth, but it's a good part. I'm keeping it. Excellent. Okay, so we've done a lot of theology today. It's crazy. Sadly, we didn't have time to look at Cana, but just to summarize, I'll just give you a couple sentences to summarize where I'm going and where I'm going to go further with John 3 and 4. We are here in the brink of discovering the stupendous experience of being inhabited by God, or how I call it, receiving the second breath, right? This is really, I think, the essence of the gospel, or one of the essences, since it's so vast, right? It's the essence I'm going to pick, right? So make sure you write this down, that really the line of thought that I'm going to follow in the next 2 or 3 stories that we're going to study is really this notion that we are at the brink of a powerful experience where we can become the receptacle or the vessel of the divine love, wisdom, light, power, right? That we have this at the fingertips, but most of us have never truly received this powerful presence. And so what I'm going to want to study with you guys, right? Because again, this is an experience which you don't have to be a Christian to have. I want to emphasize that, right? This is an experience which, in my view, has to do with the evolution of humanity. This is at our fingertips as human beings. And in as much as we know to receive this, we will receive it. Whether we believe dogmatically in Christ or not, I believe we are all, as human beings, potential vessels for this experience, right? So unlike the church, which says you have to believe X, Y, and Z in order to receive this, I'm going to take a Hebrew approach, where in Hebrew culture, there is no dogma, but there is action. In the Hebrew culture, there is a certain positioning you have to take in order to receive it. So because we are in a Hebrew text, even though it's written in Greek, I'm gonna take that idea that the receiving of the second breath is not dependent on what you believe, but on your position as a human being. Make sure you write this down, because this is really important, because this is another, in my view, this is another big mistake that the church made, is to make the presence of God in our lives dependent on a conceptual dogma and a conceptualization of whatever. This is so Greek. It just makes my skin crawl how Greek it is, right? The Hebrew would never say that. The Hebrew would always say, no, it is how you walk in life. It is how you position yourself which brings God close to you. It is not what you believe, right? And too often and mistakenly, the church has says you have to believe that, and then you will have this experience. This is not Hebrew. We are not in the Hebrew context anymore. So I'm going to go in the direction that there's a certain positioning that all of us can take, a certain mode, a certain stance a certain mode of dwelling in the world that we can adopt. Whatever it is one believes, if we adopt this stance, we will receive the indwelling of the divine presence. Are you seeing the heretical statement that I'm saying? Is everybody following my big heresy, right? That is, whatever you believe doesn't matter. It's how do you position yourself. And what we're going to study in chapter 3 and 4 is two teachings that Jesus is going to make. And he's going to basically be teaching, in my view, the main thrust of his teaching is what positioning should you take in order to receive this indwelling? What must you do, right? Not in the sense of commandments, rituals, but how must you dwell in the world? How do you exist in order to receive this, right? That will be my direction. So for next time, I want you to do the reading assignment and to focus on John 3 and 4. You can also do 2. Maybe we'll do 2 a little bit. 2, 3, let's just do 3 and 4. Just 3. A lot of you did 2 already. Just focus on the discussion with Nicodemus. This is chapter 3. And so discussion with the Pharisee. And then opposite end of the spectrum, discussion with the Samaritan woman, chapter 4. And tomorrow we're going to go over what do we learn here? What can we learn? What is the positioning Jesus is teaching us so we can receive the second breath no matter what our background, intellectual state of mind is, right? Okay, any questions? Williams.
I was just gonna say, I feel like it's interesting that you take like a non-religious approach, because most people, they're unable to have like other ideas, like the fact that Christianity is made up of many other religions, because at the time it's such a small religion. Like people don't really get that. They feel like Christianity is like the greatest, and I'm like, no, like it's a bowl of other things. Like we have pagan rituals in Christianity that we don't talk about. So it is refreshing to hear somebody who's like saying, no, it should be multiple different things. Like I forgot to say this in class. The path to enlightenment is based upon ascending a mountain, but the path doesn't necessarily have to be straight. It's every path is different.
Yeah, I love that. Yes. And that's how I feel that we can read these texts, right? We should all read these texts, but each one of us is going to receive something different and will be brought to a different path, right? So, and I'm totally fine with that. And I venture to speak in the on behalf of God that he is too. I'm sure he will bring that up when I see him. But I really think that we need to, right? God is a God of diversity. We saw that with the Tower of Babel. He doesn't want one discourse, right? He doesn't want one path. Each one of us should be having our own journey. But each one of us, I think, can benefit from stopping at the oasis of these texts and drinking and taking what is needed for the journey to come, right? So that's why I am presenting these texts to everyone, right? We are all studying these texts, even if we're not Christian, because it is a treasure that we each can drink from, right? And feed from for what's remaining. Each one of us will take a different bite. This is what's beautiful. Each one of us will take a different facet and then move forward. It's so rich that it can become like that, right? Very nice. Okay, thank you, Williams, for that. All right, guys, anything else? Shall we conclude? I think all of us are exhausted. All right, I'll stop the recording.